It's been just over a month since the Edmonton Police Service said it would crack down on open drug use to make public spaces in our city safer. Well, Police Chief Dale McFee joins us in the studio this morning with an update. Good morning.
Good morning, Tara. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Now, what has changed since the Safer Public Spaces initiative began in September?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think it's a good chance to explain what exactly we were talking about when we said safer public spaces. Is when we talk words like zero tolerance were used, what that means is zero tolerance to walk by anymore. At the end of the day, we need to do an intervention. And I think on this show before, I've talked about the 5 different individuals, Bob, Charlie, Devin, Evan, Frank, that we're dealing with out there. But what we're really doing here is looking at each possible open-air drug use event as an ability to intervene and have a discussion with somebody. And a lot of that is an intervention using health services to intervene. But the other piece that the big part of safer public spaces is to deal with ongoing violence. Those people with erratic behavior, scaring people, those people with warrants, those people that obviously are a danger to themselves and to others. And for those, that's what we have our detention management unit now ran by Radius Health. We also have the justice system. So we're putting balance back into the system. So far, it's gone very, very well. But as I said, it's not a pilot project. It's the way we're going to police from here on in, and it's going to take some time. And as we scale up and add more bodies, it will get stronger and stronger. But early signs are good. There's been a lot of violence intervened, and certainly some people that have been charged. But at the same time, there's been a lot of interventions and connections to services using some of our third-party partners, like certainly our help teams and our PAC teams, but also Radius Health in our detention management unit, running that actually to use the intervention to do a health assessment. So I think it's going to continue to evolve in a positive way. We'll continue to monitor, release those results, but early indications are it's been very, very good in putting some of the balance back.
Now, when you say intervention, walk us through what that looks like when an officer comes across someone that is acting in using open drug use.
Yeah. If it's just a person that's addicted, obviously the criminal justice system isn't the answer. If it's somebody that's down on their luck and they're just,
How do you figure that out in an instant, though?
Well, I think we know most of the people, so that's part of it. The officer's dealing with a lot of these people on an everyday basis. You certainly can tell by the actions of the individual. Are they confrontational? Are they scaring people? Are they violent? Do they have a history of violence? When you know people, you actually have the ability to make those decisions. So it's giving the officers the ability and the resources and the knowledge that they already have and standing behind them as they do their job, and getting away from some of the rhetoric that's been that all the people on our streets are homeless, because that's not certainly the case.
And so then what is done during that intervention? How do they connect them with supportive health services or anything like that?
So we have help teams, which are police and social workers, with some of our third-party agencies. We've actually had an expansion of that funded by the province, working alongside with police officers. Those have the ability to get into the services. We have a detention management unit that has 24/7 access via an iPad through access to a doctor and or a nurse practitioner. We have PACT workers, which are police and crisis workers, mental health workers, access to health services. We also have several third-party partners. On the youth side, we have UCAN doing some things with youth in relation to connect them to services. So what it's really about is, as an intervener, as that moderator, actually channeling people to the right resources for that situation. And sometimes it's going to be the criminal justice system. And the reality is, when it's a danger to others, you cannot go out there and punch and stab and hurt and scare people without consequences. So it's putting accountability. And I like to use the words on the health side is we lead with empathy, and on the justice side, we lead with accountability. But accountability doesn't necessarily have to be the justice system. It also can be connection to the health system.
We know that the health system is also very overrun right now. A lot of these resources and a lot of the organizations you mentioned are at capacity. Are you seeing any obstacle there as this Safer Public Places has started?
Well, and not to take these things lightly or to say it, but I've kind of heard the excuse that we don't have buildings enough. The reality is, let's use what we have. Let's connect people to services. I don't think anybody working in this space thinks we're going to fix this in 30 days or 6 months. This is a long haul, but the reality is, do we need more services? Yes. The province is building recovery communities, as we know. Co-chairing the housing and homeless task force and minimum standards for shelters, it was very, very clear and very, very apparent that if we're going to fix some of the issues at Edmonton, we have to have services in some of the surrounding communities. That we can't solve it without those things. So as those things are being built, we need the ability to intervene and we need the ability to act, get health assessments. Because if we don't, they're just going to the emergency rooms into the correctional facilities, and that's not the answer. We need to get the right people going to the right spaces. But I think we got to stop blaming people and blaming it on that we don't have enough infrastructure. I think we all know we need more infrastructure. I think it's been said about 2,000 times in probably the last month. But I think the other thing is there's a lot of things that we can use to get some health assessments so we get the right services to the right people, rather than think it's just an infrastructure place or a house or whatever that situation is. All those things play a part. But getting the question is sometimes more important than actually trying to solve it.
You touched on this already, but one of the plan's objectives was to, quote, reduce the unacceptable levels of violence, particularly random violence. How would you describe the safety on Edmonton's city streets today?
I think we're making progress, but is it something that we got a long way to go? Yes. And part of that is the lack of accountability in the justice system. I mean, as I think I've said on here before, we've had over 30 homicides from people that have been out on some type of release conditions. And I mean, those are 30 plus people that are no longer with us today because there was no accountability in the justice system. I know.
But isn't there also an accountability when some of those individuals have been dealt with by police as well, and that they're going to the right places, as we saw with the Chinatown incident?
Well, the Chinatown incident, to be clear, is another release condition, and as it comes out and studied in relation to the RCMP with no place to go, sometimes the place to go is the justice system. And if a person's violent, what we're saying here today is if you're violent and have a history of violence and you're not, for whatever reasons, complying with that, the justice system needs to be stronger in relation to keeping those people in custody so they can get those services in a controlled environment. Having been in charge of correctional services in the past, let's face it, when C-75 and some of the things in relation to COVID, everybody got out. And the reality is there's a place for the justice system and corrections, and there's a place for the health system on the front end. But the reality is the only way it's successful is when the two work hand in hand. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do in relation to strategy. But again, blaming just one system isn't going to solve it. Back to what I said earlier, the frontline individuals, the frontline police officers have a relationship and have a rapport with many of these people. They know who's violent. They know who's just, struggling to get connected to services. And let's face it, when you see some of the things, you get what you tolerate. If we don't actually start to intervene and we just let encampments and other things like that, where a lot of those environments aren't safe, where there's gang activity in there, we get what we tolerate. And this is really trying to do that empathy and accountability piece.
What's your priority next for safer public spaces?
Is just to keep going. We can't change directions like. That's been the problem here is everybody seems to have an opinion and think they're an expert in the space. We have a fairly good understanding in this space. We need to make sure that we're consistent. We need to make sure that we can stay connected to health services. We need to make sure that the recovery communities continue to get built out so we can actually get more into the system. But I think the next step is to stop blaming each other and continue to be consistent and just take those appropriate actions to get the right people to the right services at the right time with the right authorities.
We'll appreciate your time this morning and for coming into studio with us.
Thanks, Tara. Always appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Dale McFee is Chief of the Edmonton Police Service.